This is Michael Saltzman from Blue Sky Bio. We are continuing today the webinar series presentation on everything Blue Sky Plan. Thank you and welcome to everybody who's attending this webinar presentation. As usual, if you have questions during the presentation, please enter them into the chat box. And please also click on the webinar attendance form. The link is in the chat box. Complete your details in the webinar attendance form so that we could send you the CE credit. The point of this webinar series is to show, demonstrate, and teach practically how to use the Blue Sky Plan software. We're going to focus on a lot of the process flows that were demonstrated and mentioned in previous, more clinical webinar presentations. And the goal of this webinar series is to show the techniques so that you could use it in your practice to benefit your practice, yourselves, and of course, your patients. The topic of today's webinar presentation is the normal mode in the Blue Sky Plan software, features, and functionality. This is the fourth presentation of the webinar series. The first three covered the topics of introduction to guided surgery. It described the basic software layout, how to import and bring into the software the different surfaces, the different data sets, and basic topics of CT scans and CBCT scans. The second presentation talked about how to treatment plan and create a surgical guide for a model-based surgical guide that's using an optical scan of a model, and we demonstrated that in the wizard process flow. And the third presentation demonstrated how to plan and create a surgical guide using the impression inversion technique, otherwise known as the Ferguson technique. And we demonstrated how to use the wizard to go through that process flow to plan and to create the surgical guide. Some of what we're going to be discussing today is based on the concepts that we've discussed in the past. I'll go through it or mention it briefly as we go through our different planning and surgical guide fabrication. But if you find that you're missing some background information, then I recommend go and watch. All of these presentations are recorded. You can find them on YouTube on the Blue Sky Bio channel or from blueskyplan.com. You could access the recorded webinars, and you can also access the upcoming webinar presentations and schedule so that you could stay up to date with upcoming presentations. Since the last webinar presentation, we have the great news of a new software release. This is software build 425. And you can see on the screen a lot of the new features and functionality that's in the software. The ortho module is fully integrated, and we have a lot of new features and functionality in the ortho module, which we're not going to discuss in this presentation, but we will be discussing in future presentations. We also have the lab Pronto functionality, which we are going to be discussing, as well as the full color STL OBJ import, as well as new functionality in Blue Sky Plan that you could actually edit different surfaces, models, and CT scans and export them at no charge. So we'll be discussing that as well. The agenda for today's presentation is to go over the new software functionality that's relevant. We're going to give a software overview, a brief software overview, because we did cover that in previous webinar presentations. We're going to discuss different functionality to edit surfaces. And as I mentioned, we have made that functionality free to export. So if you're inverting impressions or editing models or cutting models or converting a CT to an STL, you could use all of that functionality and you could export the surfaces from Blue Sky Plan at no cost. You can add a base to a model. We'll see that as well. So as long as you're doing all of these manipulations prior to creating a surgical guide, and you have not yet created a surgical guide, or you're not going to be creating a surgical guide for that case, then the exports are free and they can be exported at no cost. Once the surgical guide is designed and fabricated, and then you want to export from that case, then the normal fee does apply. And of course, what we're referring to are the paid STL exports that can be purchased directly through the software via the Blue Sky Bio website that allows to export of the surgical guides from the Blue Sky Plan software. We're going to discuss treatment planning and adding implants. We're going to demonstrate and discuss new picture and render import for that OBJ full color STL file. We're going to demonstrate creating a surgical guide and everything connected to transferring data, filling out the approval form and anonymizing the case, creating a report. You could lock the treatment plan, which we'll demonstrate as well, so that nobody can edit it except you without the password. So there's a lot of functionality in the Blue Sky Plan software that we're going to touch upon and demonstrate during today's presentation. So as I mentioned, the first thing that I want to discuss is Lab Pronto. Lab Pronto, you're going to see in the software, there's a new button in the horizontal toolbar, and Lab Pronto allows the ordering of products and services, lab products and services with a click. Right now in the software, as we're going to see, we have different products and services that could be ordered, including treatment planning, surgical guide printing, including ortho planning, including ordering physical aligners or models. And all of that is, you'll see the built-in order form in the Blue Sky Plan software. We'll take a look at that. And you could order all of that directly from the software. And some of the great elements of the Lab Pronto is its turnaround time. Because the way that it works is the Lab Pronto, when you put an order through, the order gets sent out to a series of certified labs. And the lab that has time to handle your order at that time, not in the future, the lab that's available to handle your order at that particular time will claim the job and prepare the order. So if we're talking about a digital service, such as treatment planning, such as the Ortho Plan, then turnaround time could be an hour, 2 hours, depending exactly on what the order is. But the turnaround time is going to be super fast. You'll get that sent back to you. You'll download it, and it's done. Lab Pronto is all about getting it done. We know you're busy with patients, running out of the office. It's all about getting the work done. The prices are great prices, and the service, of course, is amazing service. So those are some of the benefits of Lab Pronto. And we're going to take a look at it now in the software about how that functionality works. I strategically place this box, and you'll see why in just a minute. Okay, so I'm pulling up the Blue Sky Plan software. We have that big Lab Pronto button in the horizontal toolbar next to the Start Wizard button. And when you click on it, you have a drop down. And these are different categories of what you could order currently via Lab Pronto. We have plans on expanding and adding additional services, but for the launch of the new Lab Pronto functionality, we're currently offering Pronto Plan, which is treatment planning, Pronto Guide, which is the printing of the surgical guides. It could include inserting the metal cylinders, depending on what you like. Ortho Plan, which is exactly that, an Ortho Plan. Aligners, which is the ordering the physical aligners or the physical models. And Pronto bone segmentation, if you want to have a jaw segmented from the CT scan, then you could order that directly through the software as well. So these are the initial services that are being launched. So to demonstrate the functionality, we're just going to put an order through. We're going to let's select an Ortho Plan. We want to order an Ortho Plan. Directly within the software brings up the order form. And you can see that yellow box is just to block out some of that last 4 digits of the credit card and other information that shouldn't be displayed. So we selected an Ortho Plan. So we want to order an Ortho Plan. So from the drop-down box, the first thing we do is we select exactly which service we want. Okay, it's an Ortho Plan, but what exactly do you want? Do you want a 2-jaw? Do you want a single jaw? Or do you just want the teeth segmented? And then you're going to create the plan yourself. So you could select the exact service that you want. And of course, you could see the price right there in parentheses. If you want to see the details, you click Selected Service Details, and it tells you exactly what's included in the service and exactly what's not included in the service. So if you're ordering a single jaw ortho plan, you can see that it includes loading the models, segmenting the teeth, preparing the final tooth positions. The models are going to be labeled with the patient's name or an identifier. and a platform will be added for vertical printing. What's not included, it doesn't include physical models or liners, just to be perfectly clear what you're getting. So that was just by collecting selected service details to bring up information for that particular service. Next thing you do is you go to step 2. We're going to ignore a number of implants because, of course, it's not relevant, and this is going to be removed in the next day or two. And here you could just type in any relevant information or unique identifier for the lab. Is prepare an Ortho Plan patient identifier GG. And the last thing that you have to do is attach the relevant files. Now, if you have the case loaded, let's say you already loaded the models, or if you're ordering a treatment plan, you already loaded the DICOMs, and when you bring up the form, the relevant digital files will automatically be attached to this form. If not, then you just click Attach Files. Let's navigate to the desktop, and we're going to find the model that we want to attach. Now, this is going to go through the upload process. If you want to attach additional files because they're relevant as well, then you can either multi-select or click the Attach button and select additional files. The first time that you place the order, you have to complete the details on the bottom, your shipping address, your payment method, and your primary contact. All that gets stored in the system. So when you're ordering future cases, you don't have to re-enter every time, of course. You just deal with steps 1 of selecting the service, 2, including relevant information, and 3, attaching the digital files. And once you do those 3 steps, the data uploads, and then you could press the Order Now button. While this is uploading, you could open another instance of Blue Sky Plan. You could go see a patient, go get a cup of coffee, until the digital files upload. Now, the transfer of the data is running through the BioBigBox system. So that's our HIPAA-compliant backup and transfer system. You don't have to worry if you have an account there. If you don't have an account there, you could use Lab Pronto, but that's how the data is being secured and transferred through the BioBigBox system. Just going to wait a minute because I want to actually place the order so we could see exactly how it works and the relevant process. Okay. So we now see that the Order Now button is active. We see the total price. Some services are based on the number of implants or the number of models, in which case you'll select it from the drop-down, and then the order will update. Once you're good to go, you just press the Order Now button. And you get a confirmation that your order has been placed successfully. Now, the information that you entered in your primary contact details, which includes an email address and a cell phone, those are the details that are going to get the confirmations and updates regarding your order. So you'll get notification when the order is being worked on, and you'll get notification when the order is completed. Just go ahead and click on OK. And just to demonstrate, let me just see. Okay, so to my email account, now we can move this out of the way. I received a notification that the order is being worked on. So that means that the lab has already got notification that the job has been ordered, they've claimed the job and saying that they have time to work on the job right now, and the system notifies that the order is being worked on. So this notification goes out both to the email address and a text to the cell phone. Okay, so we've covered Lab Pronto and how to place an order with it. And again, it's all accessible via that large button on the top left. And we'll see if we get additional updates during the webinar presentation. Okay, the next functionality that I want to discuss, new functionality that I want to discuss, is buccal bite registration. We now have functionality in Blue Sky Plan to align the upper and lower models properly in proper occlusion, and we're going to take a look at that right now. So right now we're in the normal mode of the surgical guide software, the surgical guide module. And something that users may or may not be aware of is that you can multi-select files and then just drop them in to the 3D view of the software. And here, obviously, we could see the models, the upper and the lower, that are imported, but they're not in proper occlusion. So we're able to open up the buccal bite registration panel. The panels are the control panels for individual functionalities, and we'll see that in the software in a bit. And the first thing we're going to do in the top of the buccal bite registration panel is identify for the software which jaw is, which model is the maxilla and which model is the mandible. We click Add Buccal Bite, and we select the relevant orientation of the models. So we're going to import a centric relation from bite. We also have the ability of importing the right and the left, the dual buccal bite scan. But we're importing the front, and we see how the models have now positioned correctly based on the bite. Okay, we could see the bite and we could see the different models. And what we're able to do is actually add and import multiple alignments. So we can import the protrusive alignment, select a different buccal bite. We could, again, if we had the relevant scans or buccal bites, we could import the left and the right instead of the front. That's an option as well. And we have the ability to turn on the function to show collisions. So we can see the color coding there. Now we have multiple positions that are imported, and we can move the mandible to any of those alignments. We're going to import one more alignment. So now we have 3 different positions, and we can move the mandible accordingly. In addition, we could show the animation of how the mandible moves from one position to another position, and we could see that the color coding is updating to identify collisions as the jaw is moving. We can also animate the movement to any position, and we could add an articulator. You could see the options to open and close the jaw. You could edit the articulator parameters. And we could also open and close the drawer using the slider. So that's new functionality that we've currently added to Blue Sky Plan. You can access it via the panel for Buccal Byte registration. In the Ortho module, there's also a button there. If you don't have the models positioned properly, you could also use the Buccal Byte registration functionality to properly position the models. Another new functionality that we've added to the software is the ability to import an OBJ file, which is a full color 3D STL type of file. So the first thing we're going to do is lower that density threshold, as we saw in the bottom left, so that we could see resemblance of the face of the patient. We're going to then go to File, Import STL, and select the OBJ file. Now this isn't actually the patient's color scan, but it's a color scan that somewhat resembles the CT for demonstration purposes. And what we're doing is similar to other points merges that we have in the software, is we're marking points in locations that we can identify in both the full 3D color and in the CT scan. Once we have that, the software does the merge. We could switch to our surfaces panel and use the normal transparency slider to affect the color scan. And we can also, of course, use our density threshold slider for the CT scan. Okay, we're now going to jump over to the software, and we're going to take a look and demonstrate some functionality in the Blue Sky Plan software. So this is the Blue Sky Plan software. This is how it looks when it's opened. We're in the normal mode. There are different modules in the software. Currently, we have 3 different modules: surgical guide, cephalometric, and orthodontics. The orthodontics is fully integrated with the 2-jaw alignment, with the 2-jaw plan. And surgical guide, we have a viewing mode, which is just for viewing. You can't make any changes. Normal, which is what we're going to demonstrate today. And the point of normal is that you could still do all the planning and create your surgical guide without having to know any numbers, without having to do any calculations, without needing any measurements. Everything is programmed into the software. The advanced mode for surgical guide module will be discussed in the next week, I believe, in the next webinar presentation. And there, the user will be able to really customize every single setting in situations where they want to make changes and customize different settings. Okay. To get started, we're going to load a set of DICOMs. There are 2 options here. You could load an STL file only, but of course, if you're treatment planning, then you want to load a set of DICOMs. The software could load compressed DICOMs, uncompressed DICOMs, zipped folders. We really try to make it as accommodating as possible. So we're going to select a CT scan that's zipped. Of course, going across the top are different shortcuts to access different parts of your computer for easy navigation. We're going to click OK. If there were multiple CT scans found, then they'd appear in rows. We're going to select the one that was selected that's relevant. We define the field of view. You want to define the field of view so it will maximize the relevant data on visibility on the screen, and also to reduce the processing power and the burden on the computer. Again, we're doing this just by grabbing and dragging with our left mouse button those yellow borders. Okay, so we now have the DICOMs loaded onto the screen. Now, a quick trick, if you're presenting and you don't want to be sharing confidential patient information, of course, which you should never do, then if you click in the top left of the 3D view, it hides what's usually the patient's name, both in the top left of the 3D view and in the horizontal toolbar in the very top of the screen. Okay, I've already anonymized this case, so it's currently a number anyway. But if you want to retain the patient's information and just hide it from visibility, just left click on that option. To fully remove the patient's data from the case, you could just go to File, Anonymize. Now that's going to erase any personal health information from the case, and you can't get it back. So the difference between just clicking in the top left is you're hiding it versus totally wiping it out by going to Anonymize. Now, if you double click on most things, then it will open a relevant panel. So if you double click on the CT scan, then it opens up the surfaces panel. The panels are mini control panels for particular functionality. You can also access the panels by going to the panel dropdown or by going to the panel menu and selecting the relevant panel. So most of them are pretty much self-defined in terms of the topic that they're connected to. So we have the dropdown, and again, if you double click on a surface, then you'll open up the surfaces panel. Double click on an implant, will open up the implant panel. So that's just another piece of helpful information. And as well, the head on the bottom left, you click on one of those arrows, then the 3D view rotates. Now, it's important in general, if you're using particular functionality, to make sure that the orientation matches. So for example, if you're using the buccal bite functionality that we demonstrated earlier, you want to put the models in the general right orientation to match the head. And we have our model manipulation panel, which will allow that. But just conceptually, in order for the buccal bite registration functionality to work properly, and we're going to have the same thing with the denture module when that comes out, is you want to have the generally correct orientation. So for the buccal bite, obviously your models won't be in perfect occlusion just by you orienting them. But before using the buccal bite functionality, face the models forward and then use the buccal bite functionality, and that will give you the proper occlusion. So that's just a heads up to try to keep things oriented to the head in the bottom left. Now, besides using the head in the bottom left to rotate, the second button from the top of the 3D view allows you to rotate as well. And of course, you could just grab and drag with your left mouse button, and that gives you freestyle rotation. Any view could be maximized just by clicking on the top button to the right of the view, and it could be returned to its spot. The different screen layouts, we have some pre-programmed one just by clicking on this icon in the horizontal toolbar. Right now, we're looking at a layout that includes the tangential view. It has 5 different cross-section slices in the top left, which is why it has the 5 there. And you could see what is most comfortable for you, what you like the most. You could also grab and drag any of the borders between the views to reposition. And the software will remember however you position the different views, and the next time you open it, it will open it the same way until you change it again. Now, a couple of quick items regarding the CT surface. First of all, what some users find helpful is you could duplicate the CT surface. Okay, so how is that helpful? So you could take, for example, one instance of the surface. You could use the isolate button and left click once on the part of the CT scan that you want to keep, and everything that's not connected to that disappears automatically. So let's go ahead and change the color, and we could change the name, and then we could do the same thing. We could click isolate and call this and then we could toggle the surfaces on and off, or we could see everything together. And if you happen to not keep an original and you just start isolating and cutting, and just click reset to defaults, and that will give you your full CT scan back. We also have the cut functionality on the bottom left, and that does exactly what you think it probably does. You just click it to turn it on, and then using your left mouse button, you could go ahead and draw a lasso about whatever you want to remove, and then it disappears. What is new that we've added is a cut all button, and the cut all button will cut through multiple surfaces. So in some situations where you're creating a surgical guide, and let's say you want to cut the surgical guide together with the model, and you could use cut all, and it will cut through any surface that's within the lasso. So that's new functionality that we've added as well. Okay, we also have the panoramic curve, which pretty much goes without saying today because the process is automated directly in the software. But if you want to update the panoramic curve, and what that's going to do for you is redraw your pano in the bottom right, you could just grab and drag the curve and reposition it. Now, what a lot of people don't know is you could actually have 3 different curves in the software. So if you're planning the upper and lower, for example, then you could have one curve for the mandible, one curve for the maxilla, and then you could switch back and forth. You could even have a 3rd curve for the occlusion. So however you position and modify any of those curves, that's how the software remembers it. And you could then switch back and forth between the different curves. And of course, that curve affects your panoramic view on the bottom right. So you want the curve to be going through the middle of the ridge of the patient. If you want to move the whole curve, you could just grab and drag that square and move the whole thing. A word about the pano is that we have 2 different visibility settings. So right now we're looking at a composite of the pano, and we're looking at everything between the 2 curves in that top middle axial view. We're looking at all the slices together. If we want to switch it to an individual slice, then we just click on the 3rd icon from the top, and it switches to an individual slice. And we can notice that instead of having the yellow curve on the inner and the outer, we now have the yellow curve going through the middle, identifying for us the exact slice that we're looking at. And if we use the sliders to the right of the pano view, then we could see how that yellow curve is moving accordingly. The top left is our cross sections, and if we use that slider, then we see the multicolor lines in the axial and the pano moving accordingly. And the top right is our tangential, which we'll take a look at in a minute with an implant, that if we move the slider, it rotates that green line, showing us exactly what slice we're looking at in our tangential view. So using the wizard functionality that was presented in the previous webinar presentations takes you step by step through the process. And what the normal mode of the software does is it gives you more freedom to control different elements, different layouts, different order of things happening. That it's giving you more freedom to do things outside the framework of the wizard. But a lot of the functionality, of course, that we're seeing now is included in the wizard and vice versa. The wizard is just a much more defined process. Okay, let's go ahead and import the model. We have different capabilities, different models that could be imported, an impression or a model. We're going to take a look at the model for the time being. I think we're going to do another case after this that includes an impression. So we go to File, Import STL Model, and we're going to select the relevant STL model. Now, there are different ways of aligning the model to the CT scan, and we've discussed the need to have a model in addition to the CT in past presentations. So I'm not going to go into that now. But right now we're doing teeth matching. And the way that you do that is just by holding down the Shift key and placing left click to place a dot to mark different teeth. So if you want to mark the dot, you hold down the Shift and left click. And to rotate, without placing the dot, you just left click and grab and drag. And then we're going to do the same thing in the pano. The order doesn't matter. You could do all your points in one scan and then in the other, or you could go back and forth, doing one and one. And you can mark every other point, or you can mark every point. There's no problem with putting too many points. Once you have your points identified, you click on Align. And we could see the outline of the model in the pano, and we could see the position of the model in our CT scan. And if it looks good, we press OK. Otherwise, we could actually add more points. If you see at this point of time that looks like a problematic merge, you could add more points. Now, we've also discussed different ways of evaluating if it's a good merge or not. You want to see it in the 3D view. You want to see it tightly around the teeth in the cross sections. And in the axial view, as you get closer to the occlusion, you want to see it wrapped around the teeth. Now, that's the functionality that exists in the wizard. Now, if you have a case with high amount of scatter, then you might want to use different options because the original alignment might not be perfect. Let's take a look at another functionality called points, where we're going to identify points on the 3D CT and on the 3D model. Before doing that, I'm just going to go back and isolate the mandible so we have better visibility. I'm going to switch to Model Manipulation Panel, click Points, and click Align. Now, instead of what we had previously of aligning the 3D model to the 2D pano, we're going to be able to align the 3D CT to the 3D model. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to carefully position points that we could identify clearly in both views. Previously, what we were doing is that we were marking teeth, and the exact location on the tooth was less relevant. What we're doing now is we're marking, to the best of our ability, the exact location in both views. You want to place at least 5 points. The more, the better. You want to disperse them throughout. And really, the more problematic the merge is, the more points you're encouraged to place. Okay, let's click OK. And now that's another way of aligning the STL file of the model to the CT scan. Another functionality that we have is adjust model position manually. And what this does is it puts the widget over the model, and you could grab and drag and rotate the wizard. You could grab and drag and rotate the model using the widget. What you could also do that I think many users are not aware of is if you click once on that crosshairs in the axial view, you can now use the arrows on your keyboard to nudge the model positioning over almost literally pixel by pixel. So you could use any of the 4 arrows on your keyboard to manipulate the model that way. If you hold down the Alt key, instead of moving the model in any of the 4 directions, then it rotates the model in any of the 4 directions. So if you have a really problematic merge and you're doing it manually, then if you could grab and drag the model, you could use the widget, but you could also use the keys on the keyboard down to the pixel level to nudge the model over. There are other import functionalities that, if we have time, we're going to demonstrate later on, but just in a sentence or two, if you have one model already merged, but you had another model that was an occlusion from a scanner, then once you merged one model, you could import the second model and it will be aligned to the first model automatically. Okay, so that's based on align to model. That's the align to model button we have. We also have the direct functionality, which is what we saw at the beginning of the presentation, that if you have 2 models that you're dragging and dropping into the software, it will retain their relative positioning to each other when they're imported into the software. The same is true if for whatever reason you want to export the model from the software and then re-import it back in. You don't need to do the alignment again. We now have the positioning in the software ready, and you could use the direct functionality for that import. So let's say we want to close the model. First of all, we have our drop down here on top, which is important to take note of. Because if you have multiple models or surfaces, you need to make sure, obviously, that you're selecting and using the right one. You also want to make sure that you have the relevant jaw selected, because that will affect the functionality. So let's say we want to close the model. We just click the Close Model button. And we're going to close the model, and we're going to add a base to that model. So if we go back to our Surfaces panel now, we now have an additional surface that's been created, and we have the closed model. Now, this model could be exported from Blue Sky Plan at no cost. If we go to File, Export Data, we could select what we want exported. And as I mentioned earlier, if there hasn't been a surgical guide fabricated, then the export will be at no cost. So we could select the model, we could click Export, and we could export the model. A new functionality that we've added to the software as well is this checkbox on the bottom, Export Separated Files to a Folder. The way that the software worked previously is if you were exporting multiple items, such as a model and an implant, or a model and a surgical guide, it combined them both into a single STL file, and that's what you saved. This checkbox allows export separated files to a folder. So if you're exporting multiple things, the software will ask you to identify a folder location on your computer to which it will export each component separately as its own STL file. So that's a new feature as well. Because we now have this free export, another interesting trick is that if you have a large model, because model sizes have been growing exponentially. Well, a few years ago, a model might be 5 or 10 megabytes. Today, when you import models from relevant scanners, you could be hitting 200 or 250 megabytes. And that could really bog down your machine. So if you find that that's the problem, you could import them into Blue Sky Plan and export them either at standard or high quality, and it will reduce the file sizes significantly. And you'll still be within the safe range of keeping the quality of the model. You won't have any issues with that, but that's another interesting point of information. You could import models that are very large and export them at a lower quality, save them as STL files. You'll see that the file sizes are much smaller, and then you can manipulate them and use them much more easily. Let's close this. Yes, there is a validation tool, and thank you for reminding me. Let's go ahead and place an implant and use the validation tool as well. Before we do that, let's mark our nerves. We could click the Add Nerve button that's up here, and the nerve panel opens. Click Detect Nerve, and we've also integrated automatic nerve detection. This isn't brand new, but if you don't know that that's there, you see I clicked once on the entrance of the nerve, and the software has marked the nerve for me. I could click Detect Nerve again and do it again. And as you can see in the image, when I click Detect Nerve, that this could be done in the 3D as I just did it, or if you have trouble identifying the 3D, then you could go to the relevant cross-section slice in the 2D and click there. So now we have our nerves identified. Let's go ahead and add an implant. Generally, when I talk about adding implants, I recommend doing it by adding a tooth. When we click Add Tooth, we select the relevant tooth, and then we click the implant button. If you used this functionality in the past, then it will default to the previously placed implant. If you haven't used it, or if you want to change the implant, you just click on the button, and you're able to select the relevant implant. You could have the drop down here for the relevant implant system. We've added a wide variety of different implant systems, and we've also added guided surgical kits. So that's the relevant information so that the user, when using the normal mode of the software, doesn't have to worry about any measurements, any dimensions, or any settings, and the software will create the surgical guide and the drilling report accordingly. Let's select an implant. So we have our implant system. It should be selected first. And then within the implant system, you could select the relevant implant that you want to place, and then click OK. We have the tooth selected, so you click OK. And we're going to be placing the tooth together with the implant. And right now, when you move the tooth, it's moving together with the implant. They're moving together. If you rotate or move it in any direction, then they're moving together. We've also added the ability to see the implant angle. This is a checkbox in Tools Preferences. So if you're interested in seeing the implant angle, then you should know that that's possible. You could also resize the virtual tooth. You could see that there are circles or nodes coming out of the virtual tooth. You could just grab and drag them, and that will resize the virtual tooth. If you want to move the implant without moving the tooth anymore, then you click on Turn Off Move With. Okay, they're not going to move together. We turn that off. So now you could go ahead and move, if you so desire, the implant without moving the virtual tooth. And of course, any location that you click, the other views update accordingly to show you that location. And if you click on an implant, then the other views update accordingly to show you that implant. Now, just a word to jump back to the tangential view. That you're able to see the tangential view. Let's just tilt the implant a bit more to see how this works. You're able to rotate the tangential view and see 360 degrees around the implant, and you could see the implant rotation as well. Many users want to see the slices oriented to the axle of the implant, that the implant is not moving. So we have that in the software. The second box from the top, if you go ahead and click on that, then you'll always keep the implant straight. So now when you rotate the tangential view, the orientation of the view is updating itself based on the implant staying vertical based on the axis of the implant. So a lot of users don't know about that functionality, so just pointing that out. If you right-click on the implant, you have a bunch of different options to replace, remove, duplicate. We're not going to go through all of that, but you should just know that it's there. You know what? Let's replace this implant. Let's put in a larger one, a longer one. And let's check out the validation panel. Implant validation. So right now, this is the implant validation panel. There are no problems currently being reported. If there was a problem, then it would show it here. The different validations that we have is for the implant drill depth. If the implant, for example, is positioned too deep, that the drill kit wouldn't have a drill that accommodates it. The minimum distance to another implant, the minimum distance to a nerve, and the maximum angle of an implant. So these are the defaults, and of course you could change it and update it as well. So if we would duplicate this implant just for demonstration purposes, you could see that when the implants are too close together, we have that exclamation mark that appears on the implants, and we have the warning that comes up: implant is too close to implant 1. So right now we're looking at the implant that's highlighted in red, and it's saying that for this implant, it's too close to implant 1. If we move the implants farther away from each other so that we pass that 3 mm minimum distance, then the exclamation marks disappear. If you're not interested in getting reports regarding, let's say, implant proximity, you could just uncheck the checkbox in the implant validation panel, and you won't get notifications regarding that. Or you could change the minimum distance to whatever you think is more appropriate. Okay, I've also dropped this nerve down for this implant down for demonstration purposes. That, of course, right now it's too close to the nerve. So for the implant that's active, for the implant that's selected, we have 2 warnings: the implant is too close to implant 1, and implant is too close to a nerve. So that's an overview of our validation panel. Okay, let's move on to creating a surgical guide. Before we do that, one more thing. We've added the new ability to import the 3D color scans, but we've always had the ability to import a 2D of the patient. Just to show that quickly, you could select a normal JPEG file and click Open. And to control this image, you click on the same option as before to load it, and you could control here the opacity, and you could also change the scale, and of course the position. That kind of move, that acts like a joystick, kind of whichever direction you move the slider in, that's the direction that the image moves to. So you should know that that functionality exists as well. If you want to replace the image, just click Load New Image, and you could replace the image with another image. To create a surgical guide, what you want to do is you want to turn off any surface that's not relevant, anything except the STL model. So we're going to turn off the CT scan. We're going to turn off the nerves. Just the word in the horizontal toolbar on the top, you have the plus next to the implant, next to the nerve, next to the tooth. Those are all to add the items. And then you have very similar icons without the plus, and that's just to toggle them on and off. So I see a lot of people that are going to surgical guide fabrication with the nerves on, which won't affect the functionality. but those could easily be turned off just by clicking on the nerve visibility button in the horizontal toolbar. Another point that I want to point out is here you have in your implant list, you have the ability to select which surgical guide you want to use. And that's important in order to determine the settings for the surgical guide and the settings for the drilling report. So once you select an implant, then the drill kits that are going to be available in the drop-down list are going to be kits that work with the implant selected. To hide or unhide multiple implants or multiple abutments or multiple software guide tubes, you could check or uncheck the checkbox. Now, the active implant stays visible. So if you want to turn off the active implant, or if you want to turn off all of the implants at the same time, then click on the picture above the column. I don't think many users know about this either. If you click on the picture above the column, then it will turn off all of the implants or abutments or software guide tubes in the list all at once. You also have the ability to lock an implant. And that's the padlock that we see here. So it's a good idea if you're going to fabricate your surgical guide to lock the position and to make sure that you don't accidentally move the implants when you're creating your surgical guide. Now you could turn off the visibility of the implant, but it's still locked in place. What we want to do is turn on the software guide tube and be in a situation that we're just looking at the model with the software guide tube. Once we have this, we go to the guide panel. We can enlarge our 3D view. We make sure the orientation is correct and click Draw Curve. I'm holding down the Shift key while I draw the curve and grabbing and dragging with my left mouse button. If I want to rotate, then I let go of the Shift key and just grab and drag with the left mouse button. I want to keep drawing, going around until I get back to my starting point. And what I'm doing by drawing the curve is defining the area on which the surgical guide is going to be created. Once I've drawn the curve, I could click Edit Curve and just make sure that everything's positioned properly, fine-tune the placement. We want to make sure that we don't have any crisscrossing lines, any jagged edges. And then we're going to click Create Surgical Guide. And this, of course, is the point where if you're going to export after you create the surgical guide, then the normal export fees apply. Just taking a look at some of the questions. The Buccal byte file is a separate STL file. So if you're acquiring the different scans, then you could acquire a scan of each model separately and a scan of the models together. That will be your Buccal byte. You could also, instead of doing it around the front and most of the arch, you could just take a snapshot on the right side, the snapshot on the left side, and as we saw earlier, then we'll have the dual draws there. The drilling protocol is dependent on, of course, the implant selected and also, of course, the drilling kit that was selected and the fabrication of the surgical guide. So we're going to take a look at that in just a minute, because now we have our surgical guide fabricated, and we're going to discuss how to make that drilling report. The drilling report, what's also great about the wizard functionality, which is great if you're doing straightforward cases, 1, 2, 3 implant cases, that the software generates a lot of the stuff in the step-by-step process flow for you and really guides you. The normal mode, while it gives you access to a lot more freedom and a lot more features, doesn't take you through that step-by-step process. Okay, so we have our surgical guide. What we can notice here, first of all, is that the axis of the implant is going directly through the middle of the surgical guide. We can notice that our brown software guide tube, which represents the positioning of the hole, is exactly aligned with the actual hole in the surgical guide. We could also notice that the software has automatically cleared away parts of the surgical guide surrounding the implant, surrounding the osteotomy, to make sure there's full access and visibility when drilling the osteotomy. So we created our surgical guide, and saving the surgical guide is as simple as clicking on the Save Surgical Guide button and choosing a location where you want to save it on your computer. That will generate the STL file, and that STL file can be sent to a 3D printer for printing. Now, for that functionality, you of course need to have STL export credits. Every new user gets 2 automatic credits. We also, if you email, here's another trick. If you email plan@blueskybio.com and ask for 6 free STL exports, and we'll send you 6 free STL exports. Now that's limited to once per user. So if you've gotten free exports from us in the past, then we won't send you again. But if you haven't gotten free exports from us and you want to really just dive into the software and start cases, then we'll give you the first several cases on us, a present from us to you. Okay, once you want to purchase STL exports, then the best way to do that is purchase just by going to File, Purchase STL Exports. We have different package sizes, from the smallest package of 6 exports, which costs $125, brings it down to around $20 a case, to larger packages of up to 525 exports. We're actually going to be adding larger packages based on demand. And the larger the package, the cheaper the per export fee is. The software automatically calculates and counts down every time you use an export, and will warn you when you're running out. Now, that's also export per case, which is also something that a lot of users might not be aware of. So if you're doing multiple exports from the same case, either because you had to redo a surgical guide, or because you want to export the model as well, or you want to export the patient's anatomy, or whatever, you could export from the surgical guide module as many times as you want for the same one export fee. Buying exports, even though you could do it via the Blue Sky Bio website as well, we don't recommend it because there it's more of a manual process. Here, once you click on buy, you'll be prompted to put in your credit card information or your PayPal. And as soon as you finish the purchase, your software gets updated automatically with those credits. It's automatic and instantaneous, so you don't need to contact anybody or email anybody. It gets updated automatically. Sometimes, here's another tip that users may not be aware of. Sometimes you don't get that update, and it's really probably in a 1 in 100 situation or less than that, where the update doesn't happen automatically. And that's because PayPal is taking a bit longer to process the order. But if you see that you didn't get your credits activated, come back and click the check order status button, and that usually takes care of it. Okay, so we get that occasionally we get users contacting us. The easiest thing to do is just click that button, check order status, and that usually resolves situations where the PayPal processing might be delayed for whatever reason. Here in the parts panel, you have other options to generate a report, which will generate the drilling report automatically and ask you where you want to save it. And you also have, here's the drilling report. It tells you which parts you're using, tells you how deep you should be drilling, your drill sequence, etc. It puts in automatically the images that's recommended for the drilling report. You also have the option to order the parts that are relevant for the case. So first of all, you could access, if you go to the parts panel, the software tells you exactly which parts are relevant for your treatment plan, which metal cylinder, which implant, and which guide kit. Now, either from this panel or from the panel that we saw previously, you just click Add Parts to Cart, and it will bring up the Blue Sky Bio website with the relevant parts added to the shopping cart. Now, if you have the kit, for example, you're obviously not forced to buy it again. You just click the red X and it disappears from the shopping cart. But this is a quick and easy way of adding the relevant implants and the relevant metal cylinders to the cart to purchase. And again, you see that information via the parts panel. It tells you exactly which implants, metal cylinder, and drills that you need, and that's for Blue Sky Bio related parts. Sending a case from within Blue Sky Plan. So first of all, think if you want to anonymize the data before you send it to remove the personal health information from the case. So that's simply, it's a click of a button. That's really all it is. It asks you to give a new name to the case, and it's done. In addition, we have a form to approve the plan, which is also functionality that I don't think all users are aware of. If you're sending it to a lab, for example, for fabrication, then you could approve the plan. Or if they're sending it to you and asking for approval, you could approve the plan. You could approve the surgical guide designed in the software, and you could save it or print it. And then the lab or whoever you're sending the case to knows that the case has been approved. To send the case from within the software, we have a button here, Upload to Bio Big Box. Bio Big Box, as I mentioned earlier, is Blue Sky Bio's HIPAA-compliant file transfer and storage system. It's free, it's freemium, so you could register and create an account. Register and create an account simply just by putting in an email and a password, and then you could get access to most features and functionality. I see actually that we got our ortho case back that we ordered from Lab Pronto. That was prepared by Barry Volts at DG3D Works. I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We'll take a look at that in just a second, because that's actually great that we got that back. Thank you, Barry. But to send data directly from Blue Sky Plan, you just click the Upload to Bio Big Box. We'd like to complete a case approval form before sending. That's what we just took a look at before. And here, you could put in your Bio Big Box email address and password. You could select the laboratory from the drop-down list that you want to send it to, or you could just put in anybody's email address, and you don't have to worry if they have a Bio Big Box account or not. They'll still get the data. And you could put in any comments that you like. If you exported the file already, then you could also choose if you want to send the entire Blue Sky Plan file, or if you just want to send the export. So that's great functionality in order to easily transfer your treatment plan to anybody that you want to transfer it to. We also have the ability, as I mentioned at the beginning, to save project locked. Now this you have to be careful with, because this will allow anybody to view the case, but to modify it, you have to have the passwords. First thing you have to do is give the case a name. You have to save it. And here it's asking you to type in a password. So if you're defining a password, first of all, you have to enter it twice to make sure there are no typos. If you're defining a password, then make sure you know what that password is. So enter the password and click OK. Now, the person that receives the file will be able to view the file, but will not be able to make any changes. They'll fully be able to view everything, but they won't be able to make any changes. The only way they can make changes is if they have the password and can unlock the file. One more thing that I realized I did not mention is just a basic measuring tool. We have a measuring tool on the top. So if you want to just know your proximity to an adjacent tooth or to a nerve or anything at all, besides the validation functionality that we have, you could just do any measurement, click on distance measure ruler, and just run a measurement. An additional measurement, you just click again and click again. When you're done, click on the same button in the horizontal toolbar to turn off the measurement tool, and you could grab and drag the actual measurement if it's blocking any sort of visibility, just to move it out of the way. You could also grab and drag the endpoints of the measurement if you want to fine tune the position or measure to something else, and you could see that the measurement gets updated automatically. Okay, let's just jump back to our Lab Pronto case because I want to show the process flow. So we see, no, let's not look there yet. Okay, so I've received a notification that your job has been completed. So first thing I could do is download files, and that starts the automatic download. In the bottom left, we could see the automatic download. We could also see that I now have the case in BioBigBox automatically. So that's a great way to store and keep your cases, but of course, you could also download and access the actual case. The folder that now exists for your order contains both the original file that you uploaded, and it contains the completed order. So not only do you have the completed order here, but you have the actual file that you sent to the lab. So the download has happened. It's already downloaded to my computer. Which I could access through my downloads folder, or I could download it from my BioBigBox account as well, just by checking and clicking download. Now this is going to download for us the Blue Sky Bio file. What we ordered, if you recall, is the Ortho Plan. We ordered a digital file, so it was sent a digital service, so it was sent to us digitally. And we're downloading the file now. We'll be able to open it and see the completed plan. If we want to send a message back to the lab, you just click on messages and type in a message here. So the lab gets confirmation that they know, obviously, that you've received the file. So there's no need to tell them. Anyway, so we have the file on our bottom left. So click Show in Folder. Let's double click that and open up the file. And this is going to be a normal Blue Sky Plan file that was designed for us. So it's really, you click the button, you put the order through, and you got it back. And if we saw in that email that this was actually sent to us around 45 minutes ago. So this case was turned around very quickly. We're going to switch to the orthodontics module. And we're not going to even take a look at the case, but just so you see the process flow, we placed the order, we got it back. Very, very convenient. Okay, I was going to show a case regarding impression inversions, but we showed the process flow in a previous webinar regarding inverting an impression. So because we're already out of time, I'm not going to go into that during this webinar presentation. But just a word about that, a great way of creating a surgical guide without even pouring up a model is just by using an impression tray at the time of the patient's CT scan. They should have it in their mouth. It's a good idea to put markers on that tray so that if there is noise, then you could use the markers for perfect alignment, and it streamlines the process flow. You could pour up the model directly in the Blue Sky Plan software. You can invert the impression directly in the Blue Sky Plan software to create the model for surgical guide fabrication. So that's presented in the previous webinar regarding impression inversion for surgical guide fabrication in the Wizard. The last thing that I want to cover today, I believe, is to demonstrate the importation of models as we discussed earlier. Okay, so this is a case, a one implant case, obviously. If we switch to our surfaces panel, right now we see that we have just the CT scan imported. If we go to File, Import STL Model, then we could import a model as we saw previously. I'm going to use teeth matching here to mark the points. Okay, now the functionality I want to demonstrate, so now we have one model already imported. Now I want to import the opposing arch, and I'm going to click OK. Instead of going to matching the teeth, which comes up automatically, I click Cancel. Instead, I click Align to Model, and I click the model to which I want to align the positioning. So in this situation, it's preparation scan. And then I click OK. What the software does, it aligns the opposing arch based on the positioning of the original model. So here I turned off the CT. We're looking at the models. We aligned the positioning of the model for the maxilla. When we imported the mandible, it was done automatically. Now, this is assuming that the models were aligned in position in a different software. Maybe it's the scanning software. They're already properly positioned in line. So Blue Sky Plan will maintain the alignment, the relative positioning of one model to the other, and import it that way into the software. If they're not aligned in occlusion, obviously, then we can use the Buccal bite functionality that we discussed at the beginning of the presentation. If we want to import, it's just another model with extracted tooth, so it works the exact same way. We click Cancel, Align to Model, align it to the model that's already imported, and that's it. So now we have imported 3 models. We only had to do the actual alignment process on one of them. Let's just change some of the colors here so we could see them. Okay, so now we have our 3 models aligned and imported, and we could toggle any of them on and off. Okay, where to learn more, just to wrap up the presentation. First of all, Blue Sky Plan is a wealth, blueskyplan.com is a wealth of information. This is the page for Lab Pronto. It has the 1-minute video. Here, let me just point out, it has the PDF file of all the different services and their prices. You could click and it jumps to the relevant service. But again, this is all in the software, all in the order form. It has the prices, and we saw it has the description. But here, if you just want to browse, you could download it, you could print it, you could zoom in. So it's all here, and it has some additional information and answers to questions as well. But if you go to blueskyplan.com, this is always the place to go for information regarding Blue Sky Plan. We have a very rich education section, which has a lot of course information on different modules and different functionalities, a lot of videos, and you could jump quickly to the relevant section from the top. We also have information regarding upcoming webinars and also access to past recording webinars. So if you click View Past Recorded Webinars, then it will take you to the list of past recorded webinars. And here's the schedule for the upcoming webinars as well. There's step-by-step process flows. If you want to review the wizard process flows that we've discussed in the past, then you could see that. You can also get access to cases to play with. So if you click on STL model import, and besides showing you the process flow, it will also allow you to download cases to play around with. Here, download the patient scan, download the model scan. In addition, there's actually a built-in tutorial in the Blue Sky plan for the wizard functionality, which also a lot of users don't know about. If you go to File, Learn Blue Sky Plan, and it will take you step by step through the wizard. It will show you a 1 minute or 2 minute video, which you could then practice on the exact step with the exact case. You move to the next step, you watch the 1 minute video, you practice again on the exact same step, the exact same case, and you walk through the learning process for the wizard. So I went on a bit of a tangent, but blueskyplan.com is always a great resource for information and for education. In addition, the Blue Sky Bio user group on Facebook is also a fantastic resource. There's a great community with a lot of dentists that are very generous with their time and will comment on cases. There's, of course, Blue Sky Bio representatives that are monitoring the group, answering questions as well. So the Blue Sky Bio user group, you could find it on Facebook, is highly recommended. It's also the first place that we send updates and any news. It's also the first place that we address questions and issues. The fastest way to get help from Blue Sky Bio and from the user base is the Blue Sky Bio user Facebook group. The 6 exports, if you like the 6 exports and you haven't yet gotten free 6 exports from Blue Sky Bio, then just email plan@blueskybio.com and we'll send them to you. And that's again limited to 1 set of 6 exports per user. You could say that you attended the webinar given by Michael Saltzman and you're requesting the 6 free exports, and we will send those to you. Okay, so we're way over time, and I've covered most of the topics I wanted to cover today. Please make sure to enter your details into the webinar attendance form so we could send you the CE credit. Check out the schedule for upcoming webinar presentations, and live events are also, there's a link to live events on the blueskyplan.com website. And of course, try out Lab Pronto. You'll be amazed with the convenience. You get what you need done with a click. It's sent back to you. Great turnaround time, great prices, and great service. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar presentation, and I wish you all a great rest of your day. Thank you, and bye-bye.